Hello, everyone, and welcome to another meeting of our Conversational AI Reading Group. Today, we are excited to have a great speaker, Gaël Richard from Télécom Paris, talking about hybrid or model-based audio deep learning. If you have any questions during the talk, please feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat. Without any further delay, the stage is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Pune, and thank you for the invitation. So I'm very happy to be here with you and to talk about, in fact, aspect of model-based audio deep learning. And basically, what I plan to the content of the talk will be as follows. So I will just give you a bit about what is IP Paris and High Paris, and especially on High Paris, and then a few information about what is our research group ADASP in Paris at Télécom Paris, and then I will dive into the more scientific part of the talk, which is talking about what is hybrid and model-based deep learning, and give three examples in two applications for performing unsupervised music source separation and unsupervised dereverberation. And as it was said by Pune, you can interrupt me at any time if you want to ask questions, and it will be a pleasure to interact. So first, a few words about High Paris. Is that in Paris, in Saclay, in IP Paris, we have built a new center which is called High Paris on AI, and it's basically a center in data science and AI for science, business, and society. And I know that you are at Mila, and I think Mila is one of the great examples that we have in mind when we created this center, is that if we can become kind of a European Mila, it's one of the idea we have behind this center. So this center is well, it has been funded by HEC, the business school, and IP Paris and INRIA, and then it was supported by corporate donors to bring us funds. And we were also happy enough that recently in 2024 to be officially labeled as an AI cluster by the French state, securing quite some decent funding for going on and make the center growing. And basically here is a map in France where there were 9 centers designed, but we were designed as one of the most important, one of the major AI center in France. And what do we do here in the center? So probably you already have similar things in Milan and or in the Montreal area. That we have activities in research, in education, and in innovation, and also impact on society. Basically, we want to be a destination for engineers, for researchers, for students when they want to be involved in AI. And we are quite decent size center because we gather a researcher from all this school at École Polytechnique, ENSTA, and INRIA, which are in the perimeters of High Paris. And if we look at the core research area, it's very broad, in AI, and it goes from fundamental methods, from the mathematical methods for AI, to more apply domains, and especially for application of AI in sciences, in cyber physics, in robotics, in economy and society, which makes quite broad in the AI. So I said just a few words about this High Paris Center because I'm the scientific director of the center, and we wish it to become more visible and on the map. Okay, but then as a researcher, I'm a professor at Télécom Paris, and I'm a member of this ADASC research group, which is a group on audio signal processing, and of course, machine learning applied to audio problems and music problems. And so I'm going just to say a few words about this research group. So we are 6 permanent staff, 6 permanent members, 5 professors, and 1 engineer. And we have quite a decent size of group of PhD students, postdocs, and research engineers. And you have a small ideas of our new anechoic room where we can, in fact, record specific scenes. For instance, this is a recording of a new database for sound scene analysis and sound event detection. So what are the topics that we do in our group? We have a bunch of work which are in the domain of signal processing, machine learning, and AI for analysis, the different types of audio signals. Some applications that we have are around speaker diarization or sound scene analysis, where we tackle problem of sound event localization, detection, and also global audio scenes analysis and recognition. Then we have other aspects on this domain, which are more on speech enhancement, which basically recovering the speech in noisy environment. An extrapolation of this domain is source separation to recover the different sources which are played together. So for music, it's like demixing the mix recording that we can have at hand. And of course, we have more and more work on discrete representation learning from audio signals, and which is also quite some work in the domain of neural audio coding, because it's a way to obtain discrete audio representation from the audio. But then the discrete representation can be used for either coding or sound transformation or classification or etc. And maybe another aspect of this of the research that we tackle in this group are on the AI for audio generation. And so we tackle work on music generation. So here is an example of lyrics generation from audio, so it can be multimodal. And we have a new activity, which I will say, which is around one of the specific problem of AI music generation is to detect when it is generated by AI. So we have quite a few starting activities on deepfake detection, music AI detection, basically, which is a growing topic. Okay, so this is very short, just to show that we are quite a decent sized group in audio with a number of topics on now broadly on machine learning applied to speech, audio, and music signals. So now let me dive into the main topic, which is talking about hybrid deep learning, model-based deep learning, and a few applications around this broad topic. So this I will say this most of the work that I will all of the work that I will describe here in this talk are part of this ERC project, ERC funded project, which is High Audio, which is a European Research Council Advanced Grant project. And High Audio stands for Hybrid and Interpretable Deep Audio Machines. So well, basically, the context and motivation of this project is that it's to witness that machine learning in machine learning there is a growing trend towards pure data-driven deep learning approach, and this one of the reasons for that is because it brings high performances, but it has some main limitations. And one of the main limitations is that all the knowledge is learned only from data. And which means that you will need a lot of data to do that. And also, it's often linked to complexity with models which are over-parameterized, huge model to learn this knowledge from data. And then we can say that we are basically in an overconsumption regime, and also often consequence of learning only from data is that it often leads to non-interpretable and non-controllable model. So one of the main goals of this project, of High Audio project, is basically to build controllable and frugal machine listening models based on expressive generative modeling, so then we can understand what we model. And the approach is to build hybrid deep learning models or model-based deep learning model by integrating our prior knowledge about the nature of the process data that we are going to use. And then we can apply this basic principle in a number of problems, such as audio scene analysis, source separation, or sound transformation, such as audio dereverberation or speech dereverberation. Okay, so if we talk about basically about physics, this is often known as physics-guided neural network, this concept, or physics-informed neural network, where we do kind of bridge between physics-based model, which use only physics, and black box neural networks, which use only data to build something which is called physics-guided neural network. So then it's a hybrid model between physics and a data-driven model. And of course, we can extrapolate this for instance, for music, where we can have different aspects of knowledge sources. So for example, knowledge sources coming from a signal model that the audio signal is based on harmonics, on sinusoids or formants. We can have a knowledge source about how the sound is produced, for instance, using physical models. We can have knowledge from how the music has been composed or built, and then we will exploit musical models. And also because sound is listened to, we can exploit perceptual models as a source of knowledge that will be exploited in the model. And then we can embed this knowledge at different points of a classic data-driven paradigm to build a so-called hybrid deep learning models. So we can have, for instance, the knowledge which is inputted in building the input representation. So just the idea of taking as input a male representation is taking to take some knowledge from perceptual models directly embedded in the representation. But of course, it can be done directly in the model, in the hybrid deep learning models, and in particular, for instance, within the loss function that are used to learn the hybrid models, where we could have a loss term which is directly linked to the fact that we take into account the adequacy of the modeling with one of the knowledge source that we want to incorporate in the model. Just to give you an idea of some of the results. Okay, so then you can exploit this principle in different types of applications. So for instance, in music generation, style transfer or sound transformation. So we had some work, for instance, in inserting information about the music structure in the positional encoding in a transformer-based method for generating symbolic music. You could also use principle directly in diffusion models to be able to drive timbre transfer from one instrument to the next. You can do that also. You can exploit information about the sources in music source separation, so how the sources are produced, and so on. Maybe just a side remark that within this project, we have also built a high audio platform where it enables the recording of audio signals from distributed locations. So of course, it's a bit different in terms of hybrid deep learning, but it's a way to record database from distributed location in an asynchronous way, and then to have databases especially appropriate for working on audio source separation of diverse draw and of course widely multi-track. So what I'm going to describe with a bit more details are these ideas of using knowledge source for doing musical source separation with two examples, one with singing voice and one with drums, and how we can combine differentiable physical models of reverberation with deep learning for speech dereverberation. So I'm going to start with the dereverberation aspect. So basically, reverberation, well, I'm pretty sure that you all know what is reverberation, but basically it can be defined as a persistence of sound after it is produced. And it is usually created when a sound reflects on surfaces, which causes multiple reflection, and all the reflections are added together to become what is called the reverberation. And you have a reverberation, of course, when you emit a sound in an enclosed room, unless if it's an anechoic room. And you also have reverberation in open space as soon as you have obstacles in front of the propagation of the sound wave. So usually when we try to model the reverberation, it is separated in different components. You have the direct path, which is the sound going directly from the source to the receiver, to the listener. And then you have a contribution due to early echoes, which are the first reverberation, the first echoes, which are going from the source to one of the walls and then to the listener. And after a given amount of time, all these echoes are added together without having the possibility to listen to these individual echoes. So then it's usually refers to this part as late reverberation. And the separation is often done because, in fact, it is common to use different models to model the early echoes part and to model the late reverberation part. So then what I've described here, when you look at all these early echoes, the late reverberation and the direct path, all that builds what we can call the room impulse response, which is characterize the filters operated by the room on the initial source. And this room effect is then a filtering effect. And we characterize this filtering effect by a room impulse response, but which can be very long if the room has a long reverberation. Okay, so what is the problem of dereverberation? The problem of dereverberation aims at removing the reverberation effect to retrieve the original source that we call the dry source or the dry signal because it has no reverberation, and the reverberated signal is often called a wet signal because it has a reverberation. So basically, we want to recover a signal's xn, which is an estimation of the dry signals from the reverberated signals yn. And of course, it has many applications. Speech enhancement is one because, in fact, if you take out the reverberation, you may expect to increase intelligibility, and you may also expect to increase the speech recognition, the automatic speech recognition, so then it can directly have contribution for this domain of robust speech recognition. But you can also imagine applications such as acoustic transfer, so imposing the acoustic of a room to a given recording, which has been recorded in a different room. Okay, so of course in the reverberation, there is a long history of methods. I'm not going to go into the details, but there are many different methods exploiting deep learning, which is very now the main trend in this domain of the reverberation. So if I go back to towards how we are going to use for in hybrid deep learning or model-based deep learning models, if we look at the typical approach for doing pure data-driven deep learning approach, it can be done in a supervised way. So we have a database, music database or speech database, where we have for each example, for each audio signal, we have a pair of wet, so reverberated signals, and dry signals. And what the neural network will learn is that when we input wet signals, it directly outputs an estimated dry signals, but it's done in a supervised way. And we are typically in the settings where we have a model which is not completely controllable or interpretable because it's just a big black box which learns the mapping between reverberated signals to dry signals. So what we could do if we want to include the concept of model-based deep learning, then we will exploit a physical model of reverberation. And basically, from the wet signals, we will exploit the physical models, which will bring information to the neural network and will help to learn the mapping from wet to dry signal. So that's one of the basic ideas that we're going to exploit. So you can see that in this scheme, I did not show that we have at some point of time the wet and the dry signal, because in fact I will show later on that using a physical models, there is a possibility to only have wet signals or having a very limited number of pair signals, wet and dry, to learn this neural network, because we characterize the knowledge within the knowledge of reverberation, I would say, within this physical model. So the physical models, as I mentioned before, we have a room in the reverberation can be modeled as a filtering of the dry signals with an impulse response, the impulse response characterizing the reverberation. And this impulse response can be split in two parts, a part which is responsible for the early echoes and a part which models the late reverberation. So what I'm going to discuss later on is that we are going to consider only the late reverberation, and what we will try to estimate is not the pure dry signals, but it's the dry signals potentially with early echoes. So then we have also ways to describe what is a global. So then now we have to define what is the physical models we are going to use, how we are going to characterize the physics information that we are going to include in our models. And in our settings, we are going to use a simple model that I will describe in a moment, which is based on the knowledge of two important parameters, which is a direct to reverberant ratio, which quantifies basically the energy balance between the direct path and the reverberant tail. So between the direct path and all this reverberation, or the RT60, which can be roughly estimated from the slope of the energy decay curve as it is given in this equation. Then when we have these two parameters, this is sufficient to characterize one of the model which is known for a late reverberation model, which I will call here the Pollack reverberation model. And basically this model is just stating that the impulse response for the late reverberation is a white noise, a Gaussian white noise, which is modulated in amplitude by an exponential. And these parameters t, which is dependent on the RT60, will set up how fast the tail decrease to zero. And of course, this reverberation is valid. This Pollack model is valid when we are in this late reverberation regime. So then after what can be called the mixing time, which depends on the volume of the room. And so then we have some linked with the physics, with physics parameters, which characterize the room in which the recording may have been recorded. Okay, so it's a physics model, but it's a physics-inspired model because, of course, it doesn't describe very precisely the physics of the phenomenon that has occurred in when the sound has been recorded. So now if we want to go towards model-based deep reverberation, we are going to exploit our physics model that now we have defined. So one setting will be the following. We say, okay, let's imagine that we have the parameters of this physics model. The parameters of the physics model are theta. Then we have a model which can give us a first estimation of a dereverberated signals. This will be the dereverberation model, which can be pre-learned. If we have a model, if we have a black box model, it can be pre-learned, but it can be learned jointly with the other terms. And then we have a synthesizer, basically that from the parameter synthesize a potential room impulse response. And then we can convolve the room impulse response with the dry signal and obtain a new estimated reverberant signal. And if everything is correct, the dry signal and the synthesized rear, then we have an estimated reverberant signals, which would be very close to the input reverberant signals. So then the loss that is used is a reverberation matching loss, which tries to estimate the rear synthesizer to find the best rear here, and can adapt this model to have the best dry signal so that these two reverberant signals are as close as possible. So then typically we have a reverberation loss which is like that, with regulation terms that can cope with low amplitude. So what is the main advantage? What are the main advantages of this model? First, it can be trained in a fully unsupervised way. There is no need of wait, dry pair of signals to learn. The derivation model is also a bit more interpretable because the estimated reverberant signals that we obtain is really the convolution of a synthesized rear from what we believe is our knowledge about the physics, and the estimated dry signal, which is a dereverberated signal that is obtained. And then you may use a much smaller network to have similar performance, because you have exploited the knowledge, and you're not searching for solutions which are beyond the space of realistic solution for this problem of dereverberation. Okay, so then you can go maybe one step further, because before you say that, okay, basically you know the parameters of the physics models that synthesize a probable room impulse response for the full problem. But if you have an unknown audio signals coming in, you do not have the physics parameters. So you need to estimate the physics parameters. So then this is just an extension. When you have the reverberant audio, you still have these derivation models which give you an estimate of the dry signal S hat. But you have, in addition, an acoustic analyzer which, from the audio signals, estimate the acoustic parameters. And then you have this room impulse synthesizer which can synthesize room impulse response. So then you can learn the different models. So what it is done in this work, and I think I describe a bit more later, is that the acoustic analyzer is pre-trained, which means that you would need, for this type of model, you will need to have pairs of acoustic parameters and reverberant signal to train this acoustic analyzer, but all the rest can be learned then end-to-end, I would say, from this. And another thing that you can do with this model is that you can sample multiple room impulse response, and then you have different strategies to how to use these multiple impulse response candidates. Either you select the best one, or you select an average of these candidates. And then, so there is different strategies that you can use for this room impulse response. But I'm not going to go into the detail for this. So then, what are the outcomes of such a model? So I'm going to give a few results. So here we have some details about with the models and the data sets which have been used for the evaluation. And you have also still the parameters, so how we train the acoustic analyzer when it is used. So then it's only 100 samples of couples of reverberated signals and a set of parameters. And then we compute classic evaluation objective metrics, which are given here. And each metric is more or less meant to evaluate an aspect of the signals. Yes, I think I can see one question. So
yeah.
Please.
Yeah, Julian, if you want, please.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I have a couple questions actually. It's super interesting. Thank you. So the first one, just to make sure I understand, is in the later slides that you showed, basically you have a reverberation model, but you don't know the parameters, and then you use deep learning to estimate these parameters. So I wanted to know if there would be some equivalent for open soundscape models when you don't have the room impulse response model, or if you would have an idea of how to deal with those open environment.
Okay, so I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but let me try to answer. And if I did not properly answer, you can rephrase. So in this setting, when we have an input, when we have learned the system, when we have I put a new audio signals, we don't know the parameters. So we have to estimate them using the acoustic analyzer. But in what we do in our system, we pre-train this acoustic analyzer beforehand. And for that, we need to have a set of room impulse response corresponding to the ideal parameters. So then we have the ideal parameters. We have the room impulse response. We can have reverberant signals corresponding to these ideal parameters. And using this pair of signals, we learn the acoustic analyzer. But then when it's learned, it can, theoretically, it can operate to any type of environment, even for audio, which is out of domain, so not in the domain of where these parameters have been defined.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I had another question, which is, so if you know the echo as a function of the signal, then you could write. Can you imagine you could write the total signals that you record as the sum of the signal plus the echo? And could you not solve directly, in your model to estimate the signal directly without deep learning, just solving a set of equations?
Okay, so it's a nice comment. Actually, there is some work which, in fact, the model will be okay. You say okay, the dry signal, the reverberated signals is a dry signal that you try to estimate, which is added with delays. Okay, and
Yes.
you estimate the delays and amplitude coefficients of each of the delays. So this is kind of a classic, a traditional approach. And in fact, with one of my PhD students, we developed a technique based on this principle with sparse approximation and then in fact, yes, you can do that. In practice, it's not. It can take out a few echoes where they are very separated, but as soon as you go to the second order, it becomes more difficult with this type of approach. And another thing is that you are not extremely interested in removing the pre-echoes, the first echoes. And one of the reasons for that is that if you, for intelligibility, a pure dry signals is less intelligible than a dry signals with a pre-echoes. Because
Okay.
then it brings a bit more richness to the sound, and it's like if you talk in a purely anechoic room, it's not that clear that you have a better intelligibility. In fact, it's shown that it's good to have a few pre-echoes to enhance intelligibility. And the other, so then this is one of the reasons. And what is detrimental is really the late reverberation.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
But yes, it certainly, if you want to exploit this type of concept within the model and within this concept of hybrid deep learning, then you can exploit, in fact, this knowledge. In fact, the pre-echoes are just replication of the dry signals with delays and amplitude, and you can incorporate this knowledge and exploit this knowledge for having a signal which is closer to the dry signals compared to only the dry signals with pre-echoes.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Okay, so if you look at the result of such, just to give broad result, is that if you do that, then the method is doing dereverberation. If you compare these objective metrics of the reverberant signals compared to what it can be extracted, whatever you exploit as supervision, so in a fully unsupervised case or with strong or weak supervision with oracle values for the reverberation parameters. What you can see also is that weakly supervised methods outperform a strong baseline, which is not using machine learning, but it's very efficient method. And most metric, if you can, which is not the case for all the methods. In fact, it's not really the case for the fully unsupervised method, which is a bit disappointing. But what is interesting is that the fully unsupervised method that I've presented is outperforming this strong baseline when we are in out of domain. So which means when we have a real room impulse response and not trying to inverse the reverberation when we had generated synthetic reverberated signals using synthetic room impulse response. But when we use a real room impulse response, then this unsupervised method is bringing some advantage compared to a previous state of the art. Okay, there are a number of sound signals, but maybe the best is probably that if you are interested, that you go for listening to sound rather than I play them. But there are a full demo on this website, and well, you have all your time to listen to the reverberation characteristic. Okay, so then now I will give other examples, which are a domain which is related, which is music source separation, and other example how we can exploit knowledge from knowledge sources. So the first example I'm going to give is so source separation. Just to recall what it is, we have, and if we do it the same way that I've presented for dereverberation, we have a music database where we associate the mix of the music and all the individual tracks. And what we learn the deep neural network is the transformation between the polyphonic music and all the individual sources. So again, as previously, such a model has the main problem as before. It's more or less non-interpretable, and it's a complex model, and we need to have this database of separated source and mix, which is not always easy to obtain. So here's the knowledge. It will be a physical model of production, and we are going to use a simple source filter model of speech production. And basically, this model is rather it mimics what we do when we speak. So we say that the output speech can be modeled as a source signal, which is a vibration of the vocal folds, the vibration of in the larynx, and then we have a filter, and the filter is the way the sound is transformed from the sound emitted at the vocal folds by the tubes of the nasal cavity and oral cavity, and this will be a resonator, and it will be basically a filter. And if we look at the spectrum, it basically in the spectral domain, you have a spectrum of the source, which has a fundamental frequency with harmonics, and the filter will shape the resonance in each frequency around the formants, if it's speech, to produce the output speech spectrum. So the idea is that now we can recast this problem using a generative model and say that now what we are going to compare is again the input polyphonic music and the synthesized polyphonic music, which will be built from summing the individual source, which can be generated by synthesizers. And in fact, if you have a physical model for one of the source, for instance, here the singing voice, then if you have a differentiable generative model for a singing voice, then you can directly incorporate the synthesizer in the process. And what we learn the deep neural network are the parameters which drive the parameters of the synthesizer for each individual sources. And the loss will then be only on the comparison between the polyphonic music and the synthesized music. So again, when we do that, we can have a fully unsupervised model. There is no need for having at any point of time the individual tracks. And also, if you exploit it, for instance, for working on the choir singing voice separation, then you have a bunch of similar sources which have each of them their sound production model, but there can be very homogeneous, which means it's the same sources, but they will just have different parameters to generate each of the individual tracks. Okay, so then if I go into a little bit more details for this model, we have the incoming mixture. These incoming mixtures we estimate, so in the first iteration of this work, we had a modules which is outside the main modules, which will just estimate all the fundamental frequency of the source present in the mixtures. Then there will be a kind of simple paradigm to assign each fundamental frequency to each source. And this information will be input as knowledge to the deep neural network. And the deep neural network will learn all the remaining parameters for each of the source. And all the source will be added here. You obtain the synthesized mixtures, and then you just compare with a spectral loss, a multi-resolution spectral loss, the mixtures with the synthesized mixtures. And of course, here you obtain the source separation just by taking the source within the whole model. And then this is completely trained end to end. So in the first model, this model, multiple F0 estimation, is trained outside as a black box model. So it's not completely satisfactory because we do not have a single model that learns everything. And in fact, this multi-F0 estimation may need to have an annotated database of F0 and audio. And in our case, this multiple models is the one by Cuesta and al, which is also a deep neural network for learning, for estimating multiple F0. So then, to give a little bit more details, all the source here are a source filter model, where we have a part which is linked to the excitation, the source, a part linked to the filter, which produce the voice signals, and each of the models follows this model. In practice, it's a little bit more complex than just an excitation and the source. So in fact, we have the excitation has a number of parameters. We have the fundamental frequency. We have gain to give when there is a presence of vocal sounds. There is kind of a global spectrum of the source, and then it produces kind of the harmonic part of the source. We have another part which produces a noise part of the source, and all that added together gives the excitation source. And then we have this filter, which is and I'm not going to detail this part, but it's basically obtained using a line spectral frequency, which is a method, an alternative method to linear prediction to obtain the filter, but that with a guarantee of stability of this filter. So this is the basic parametric model. And if you want a little bit more details on the global architectures, basically the F0 is not learned because it's obtained from the outside models, but everything in green, which is the different models, are components which are learned end-to-end with only this loss of reconstruction between the mixtures and the synthesized mixtures. And you see for each component which type of parameters they're obtained, which are in white here. So the amplitude, the harmonic amplitude, the noise gain, the all-pole filter coefficients for the filters, and so on. So it's really the deep neural network here learned parameters of the synthesizer, which allow to synthesize the individual source, which are then mixed together. So then we can then compare the mixtures, the synthesized mixture of the individual mixtures. And of course, if one of the big advantage here is that never you had the knowledge of what is an individual source. So you don't need to have a database where you have the mixtures and the individual sources that has composed the mixtures, because you have the knowledge source of what should be the different sources. Okay, so what are the results of this type of approach? What can be shown is that we can obtain performance which are with this unsupervised settings, so it's in a control settings because it's only for choir singing, that it's almost as good as a supervised method when you learn with the knowledge of the individual sources. And but one big advantage is that there is almost no drop of performance when you use much less training data. So then the promise of inserting knowledge early in the process, and I mean within the deep neural network, in fact, allows you to learn a system with much less training data. And because you have a much less drop of performance if you use less training data than the supervised model. And in fact, you have a much larger drop of performance if you use the supervised model when you use only a part of the training data. So this is one of the biggest gain, of course, for exploiting knowledge in your training. Okay, and then rapidly, before I jump to the last topic of the talk, this method was extended by incorporating the deep F0 multi-F0 estimator within the full models, where then you have only the mixtures that comes in and the mixtures that comes out, and you only have on one loss, and you will estimate the full model only with, so then you do not rely on an external F0 estimation. So I will maybe skip a bit the details of how this is done, but just to show some of the results is that with this fully differentiable model for unsupervised singing voice representation, you can see that the end-to-end approach is a little bit less accurate than the baseline semi-integrated approach that we had before. But it's much more robust on out-of-domain data than before, because in fact, we have the capacity to change the multi-pitch estimation, which depends on which is directly on in the model. And the fact that it's constrained by the type of source that is modeled by this source prediction model help also to have a global gain in performance here compared to the baseline that we had. Okay, again, I'm not going to play sound here. We only play sound for the last example, but there is also demos and for the previous model, which is not fully differentiable, and the one which is fully differentiable in this link. So don't hesitate to check them out and to listen to all the examples which are online. Okay, and the final example I'm going to describe, maybe rapidly, so then we have a few minutes for questions, is on drum source separation. So it's a brand new, it's very recent work. But the idea will be a bit similar to the one that I just described for a singing voice, is that it will rely on a synthesizer that will synthesize the source, which will be the way to avoid to have the association of the mixtures and the separated source for learning the system. So here it's on drum. So basically the task here is that we have a full drum system and we want to isolate the different drum elements that are present in the mixture, in the drum mixtures. So how it is, what is the basic functioning? We have the input drum mix, we extract some features, and then it's basically an analysis synthesis scheme. Then from these features, we can we can exploit an automatic drum transcription system. And with the automatic drum transcription system and a drum synthesizer, we're going to regenerate the drum estimate, each of the source, because we have transcribed this input into different stems. We have the synthesizer, which will estimate what is the spectrum of the different elements, and we can synthesize the different estimate and then build a synthesis estimate of each of the track, and we can have a global loss, which compares the input drum mix with the sum of the synthesis estimate of each of the individual stems. So of course, the whole system is a bit more complex. So then since I have almost used all my time, I'm just going to give the global ID, but you can see that we have different losses here. So the global loss, which is the reconstruction loss from the reconstructed mix from the input mix, which is the same as for the previous audio source separation ID. But we have other loss. We have a transcription loss because we have to learn in this whole process a transcription. And the transcription, we will be directly lost in this transcription head part of the neural network. And we have also another neural network here, which is basically a classifier, which will estimate which drum kit is used. So we have a number of discretized drum kit, and it will select which drum kit is the closest to the audio which is coming in to exploit the spectrum from this drum kit for the synthesizer. And at inference, when it comes in, the transcription provide estimation of onset, which are combined with individual individual synthesis of each element of the drum kits. And then you have this sequencer, which builds each of the tracks from the transcription elements, thus the synthesis of the individual element of the drum kit to build this reconstructed mix at the end. So the concept is more or less the same. It's a bit more complex because it's there is here a transcription part, but before we had the transcription part was limited to the estimation of the fundamental frequency. Here we estimate when and how strong each element of the drum track is of the drum signals is activated. Okay, let me switch. Just say a word on the synthesizer. So the synthesizer is typically something like that. We have mixture embeddings which captures the characteristic of the timbre of the drums. We have one hot encoding of the individual kit which have been used for learning the system, and basically from that we can synthesize elements. One-shot element. We estimate envelope of this element, and for that we use we have extended an approach proposed around temporal convolution network for this, and which can provide our synthesis at the output. So here is typical examples of individual one-shot example that we can synthesize. You have the original on the bottom and the synthesized on the top. We can see that we can well synthesize noise aspect, but also some kind of spectral lines, which are also present in drum signals. It's with this synthesizer, which is quite efficient for this type of approach. So I don't have much time, so maybe here I will do a small demo for this system. So let me know if you can if you can hear something. So here is the basic original mix, okay? And we try to extract the individual stems from the general mix, so then in a fully unsupervised way, because we never have the individual track. So if I go back in the beginning, so the ground truth solution for this, the ground truth for the kick drum is this one. So let me play at the beginning. And this is what is obtained by one of the versions of our method. It's not perfect, but it's not too bad. And then I can give an example for the snare drum. This is what needs to be obtained. And I will play it again, but then for what is estimated by our method. Okay. And maybe I can give an example for the cymbal. Okay, the cymbal, it's only here. And this is what it obtains from our model. So it lost a little bit the attack. It's a little bit better with the other version of our model. Okay, but then it gives an idea. Again, you can go also to see the demo. I will give the link where you have a number of demo with a number of examples where you can listen to the different aspect. So what is important here, maybe to say that I've not say in the middle, is that sorry to not present all the slides, but is that we have a number of classes that is exploited, and we can give results either by saying that we have 9 different elements or only 5 different elements, and this is the type of evaluation that we do compared to the state of the art. So here the full demo is here. If you want to check the audio and listen to the different examples, and also if you want to download the code because it's fully open source. So let me conclude now, and what I want to say. I mean, I think maybe it's rather clear. Maybe I've said it too much. Is that that what I believe in is really doing hybrid methods. So exploiting in the best way as possible the knowledge that we have about the signals, either as how it is produced, how it is listened to, or how it is composed. So then we can build systems which have more interpretability, more controllability, more explainability globally, and can be also more frugal because we need less data to learn this model, which will be smaller because we have, in fact, better exploit the knowledge that we have about the audio that we are analyzing or transforming or synthesizing. Okay, so let me stop here, and I've been maybe a bit long, but let me stop here in any case.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the great presentation. I would like to ask the audience to maybe ask questions if you have any. Maybe we have time for few. Maybe let's start from Sam.
Hello, Gaël. Thank you very much for the great talk. I was just wondering, so like you've been talking about these physics-inspired models, right? Like, I was wondering if you are planning to use these in like classification applications for like explainable classification. I saw that you mentioned, for instance, deepfake detection. Yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay, so I'm not personally working currently on deepfake detection, but I think I hope I will not say wrong thing, but I think one of the papers that has been recently published in ISMIR conference, I think maybe PES Award paper, in fact exploit signal processing knowledge to do deepfake detection. And in fact, it's because they exploit the knowledge of how the signal processing should be done or can be done, that they can detect a process which is apparently not obeying the classic signal processing process. So then, yes, I think for deepfake detection, there is certainly rooms to design hybrid deep learning method for detecting deepfake. Because in fact, but it will rely on the possibility to have a good knowledge of what are the target audio. So in fact, maybe signal models, that audio signals are made of sinusoids and noise, and sinusoid which does not break in a weird manner, or these type of things can of course be exploited in designing a hybrid deep model for deepfake. And for the model I described for the audio drum, the inverse drum machine, it incorporates transcription. So it's incorporating transcription and synthesis, and then the model, which is the loss which is built to learn the model, is a reconstruction loss, and so it exploits these hybrid deep learning models. But in fact, the transcription head is not. I mean, we do not exploit clearly physics model to help the transcription to be operated. And in fact, this could be typically a way to do classification. For the classification is in this part, but to do classification in exploiting a physics model. So yes, I will say yes. I think it's appropriate.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, there's one question in the chat. Is Udemy suitable for online scenarios, and have you tested that?
So online scenario, you mean working like real time or?
I think so. Maybe Ibrahim, if you want to just clarify on that. You said yes, it's like streaming or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so in the model I have described, it's not real time in the sense that we use a certain duration of audio to do the analysis, but nothing prevents the model to be real time. I mean, not real time. I mean, we do not fully exploit the repetition. For instance, in the inverse drum machine, we do not fully exploit the fact that it's repeated over time. So then we use the time window is not extreme. So then the delay for the processing to work, I would say real time, can be short. So it can work online. It's you do not need the full song to do the separation. What I mean. So then it can work online, maybe with a slight delay of the duration of the window, but. Yes, so then it's not the fact that you do hybrid deep learning. It doesn't prevent the possibility to build online system.
That's it. So I have one more question. Maybe it's like when you use like this hybrid model, you use some sort of external knowledge, like features from. Are this selection of features is only based on the external and domain knowledge that you have? Is there any metric that could be used to guide what kind of feature would be suitable for the task that we are using?
Well, that's a very good question. You will like to find in an automatic manner which features are important for the task at hand.
Exactly.
Yes, of course, it's not the way that we have done it because we have said, okay, we have the knowledge, so we define what is the knowledge interesting, and then we try to exploit it. But in practice, we go, in fact, a bit in this direction because we have, for instance, the knowledge of for the dereverberation method that I've described. We had in mind in having a much more sophisticated reverberation model at the beginning, but it was not working at all. And we realized that if we had a simple model with simple parameters, it was more efficient because we had a better way to estimate these parameters to generate something which puts the whole system in within domain conditions, which was not the case when we had a too sophisticated model. So, but we could imagine that we have kind of a feature extraction module, which extract a bunch of features that we believe are interesting. And then we want the model to select the one who has the most impact in learning reconstruction metrics in selecting only a few of these features. Yes, I think it's definitely something that could be tried.
Okay, perfect. Thanks again. Thanks everyone for joining. For next week announcement, we have Dilek Tour from Illinois at Urbana-Champaign talking about accountable conversational agent for task completion. Thank you everyone for joining and looking forward to meeting you all next week.